Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and a privilege to be here in Hamburg to speak to you about the evolution taking place in marketing and communications from madmen to mathmen, and particularly in conjunction with some of the work that we contributed to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Throughout the presidential cycle in 2016, Trump was vocal about the fact that it is candidates and not technologies that win campaigns. And in this regard, we would absolutely agree with him. That said, I'd like to talk today about three technologies, three methodologies that are shaping the way that political campaigns and brand and communication campaigns are being delivered. The first of these is behavioral science. And probably the easiest way to explain this is through illustration. Were you lucky enough to own a private beach and you wanted to stop people from swimming in your piece of the ocean, you might put up this piece of advertising on the left. This is informational communication and seeks to inform attitudes. Conversely, you might seek to employ the piece of communication on the right. This is behavioral communication, and it seeks to probe an altogether deeper motivation. Clearly, the threat of being eaten by a shark is a very compelling argument to stop you swimming in the sea. Yet this is extremely difficult to do, and most advertising and communication agencies today still segment and target based on demographics, geographics, consumer and lifestyle attribution, and media consumption. But when you stop for just a moment and think about this, the idea of segmenting audiences, say, based on gender, is very ridiculous. The idea that all women should get the same message simply because of their sex, or all African Americans because of their ethnicity, or all old people, or rich people, or young people because of their demographics, it simply doesn't make sense. Clearly, your demographics, your geographics, your media consumption, your consumer and lifestyle attributes will influence the way that you see the world. But as important, or possibly more important, is personality, or psychographics. An understanding of personality is key, because it is personality that informs decision-making, and clearly your decisions will drive the way that you vote or which products and services that you purchase. So at Cambridge, we've rolled out a very long-form quantitative instrument to probe the underlying traits that make up your personality. We use the cutting edge in experimental psychology. This is the OCEAN 5-factor personality model. OCEAN being an acronym for O, openness, how open you are to new experiences. Conscientiousness, how much you care about order and habits and planning in your life. Extroversion, how socially minded you are. Agreeableness, whether you tend to put your needs ahead of society and community, or vice versa. And finally, neuroticism, a measurement of how much you tend to worry. Why is this important? It's important because if you're targeting audiences purely on demographics, you might end up sending the same message to people who really have very different worldviews. In this example, these two individuals, both the same gender, both the same income, both the same lifestyle attributes, broadly. But we can see that the gentleman on the left here has a very conscientious and agreeable personality, whereas on this side, the gentleman's very extroverted. So if we knew that both these individuals were in the market for an automotive, we might want to use psychographics to target and message them differently. Specifically, a highly agreeable person might be more interested in a product that had qualities that were more relevant in today's society, such as an electronic engine. A conscientious person could be persuaded by a rational, fact-based argument, such as the one that's set out in this piece of creative. This is in contrast to an extrovert to whom we might want to market a sports car, and to use language and imagery that evokes the emotion and the experience that buying such a car would provide. The second technology I want to talk about is data analytics. Big data is fundamentally changing the way that communications are undertaken. Back in the 1950s, the era of Mad Men, creative was top-down. That is, brilliant minds came up with creative concepts, and they pushed them onto an audience in the hope that they would resonate. But today, we can use big data to understand exactly what messages each specific group within a target audience need to hear way before the creative process is even started. So what is big data? Big data is really the aggregation of as many data points that you can possibly get your hands on. This includes factual data, demographic data such as age, gender, ethnicity, religion, and so forth. Attitudinal data, what car you drive, what magazines you read, what social media you engage with, what church you attend, what golf club you belong to, and so forth. And of course, behavioral or personality data, an understanding of your world view. So we can take all these data and synthesize them into one database of record and use this to build complex but very powerful models about the audiences we're seeking to engage with, and then use these models to drive a much more individualized communication engagement. Let me illustrate this with a rather simple example. For a dental product, toothpaste, you can see a data dashboard. The engagement map up here is divided between those people who are more likely to be influenced by an economic argument, price sensitivity, and on the other axis, we see those people more likely to engage with a brand preference. So clearly, the people on the right, shaded blue, might respond better to an offer for a discount. That could be a positive way to engage them. Conversely, the people who are more stimulated by brand preference will need a persuasive argument based around product features, such as the ones listed here: removes stains, whitens teeth, bad breath, gum health, etc. But this dashboard also informs us about which media channels different audiences are likely to engage with, and earning potentials, therefore spend potentials, and basic demographics. Overlaid on this is an understanding of personality or psychographics, so we can start to nuance our messages, taking this into account. So, how does this manifest itself in a piece of creative? If the audience we're seeking to engage with is largely female, 25 to 30, single, middle income, and so forth, that needs to be reflected in our creative, both in imagery and in the language that we use. We can see that this person or this group is active on Facebook, so that's going to be our channel of communication. Most importantly, we know they need a persuasion message built around the fact that this toothpaste removes stains. And finally, the personality of this group is neurotic, so we need an emotional message. So the fact that stains might stop before they spoil your smile is a very powerful message indeed. The last leg of the stool is addressable ad tech. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm very much of the belief that blanket advertising is dead. The idea that millions of people are going to receive one piece of communication is something that our children will never understand. Communication is getting ever more individualized. We are moving to an age where we are going to have a personal relationship with brands. So whether they communicate with you through mail, email, text, they're going to be writing to you as individuals, such that a husband and a wife in the same household can receive different communications, even if they're from the same company and on the same product. Bill Harvey famously said, on average, a 10% increase in purchase target density will generate a 7% increase in incremental sales. We can use digital marketing to upload offline target segments with cookies in order to identify and engage the densest possible audiences for specific messages. In America, we can also take offline target segments and match them to set-top box viewing data. That is cable data. I'm sure you're aware, but every time you watch a cable television program, the programs that you're watching are being recorded and sent back to the cable provider. And this gives us a very clear understanding of what different audiences watch on television. We can match these viewing habits against the audiences that we're interested in marketing to, such that we can purchase inventory in the programs that have the highest density of the people we want to engage with. Similarly, in America, we can undertake hyperlocal television. That is buying not national broadcast or even regional broadcast, but buying by local cable provider, which allows you to purchase by just a handful of zip codes or postcodes, which allows you to target very, very specifically key audience groups. So, if you're in any doubt about what I'm saying, have a look at where the money's going. Have a look at where the big brands, the big advertising agencies are investing. Walmart and Ford both have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in the last couple of years in building analytics capabilities or acquiring them. Ogilvy, the advertising giant, just last week launched their Center for Behavioral Science in an attempt to understand the impact of psychology on marketing. Kroger, the retail giant, acquired dunnhumby, the British analytics firm. Martin Sorrell, the guru of advertising, for at least 4 years has been talking about the shift away from creative and towards science and data. And again, Havas, the French conglomerate, is moving in the same direction. So just to illustrate how some of these technologies can manifest themselves, a few slides on the work we undertook for the Trump campaign, which started back in June 2016. When Cambridge Analytica, my firm, joined the Trump campaign, there were only 30 full-time employees on the campaign, which is in stark contrast to the Clinton campaign, which had somewhere close to 800 people working on it. Clearly, we were an attractive proposition. We'd just spent 14 months working on the Ben Carson and Ted Cruz campaign and had collected a huge amount of voter data and research and had built an entire technological infrastructure which we were able to hand over to the Trump team. We were therefore contracted as an end-to-end technology provider, starting with research, where we were undertaking somewhere in the region of 1,500 polls each week in each state. That is 300 or 400,000 polls a month in order to inform reporting dashboards to help the campaign understand its asset allocation and resource allocation, and also to inform our models, our predictive models about the audiences we needed to engage with. These models then informed the segmentation, which in turn informed the engagement. We placed over $100 million of digital buy for the Trump campaign and tens of millions of dollars of data-driven television. So, starting with research, what sort of things did we provide to the campaign? Well, these weekly polls provided a very powerful insight into tracking the electorate. This was particularly relevant when incidents took place that needed responding to. A particularly good example might be the hot mic incident, where Trump's locker room banter was broadcast nationally. What we were able to tell the campaign is that whilst in some states his ratings plummeted, in others they actually increased. This allowed the campaign to allocate resources in a very targeted way. Another type of dashboard is the one over here, which shows heat maps of persuadable voters. That is, voters who still hadn't made up their decision who they were going to vote for and were likely targets for us. A good example of this would be Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a state that is traditionally a very safe Democrat seat. So much so that the Clinton campaign never visited Wisconsin once in the entire election. But we were able to use data to identify that there was very large quantities of persuadable voters there that could be influenced to vote for the Trump campaign. And so much so, the Trump campaign had 5 rallies there. Those five rallies probably gave Trump contact with some 60 or 70,000 voters. And when you think that this state was won by a margin of only 50,000 voters, that gives you some understanding of how powerful this data is. Predictive models. We use a lot of research to build models. Obviously, donor models are fundamentally important. Every campaign needs cash to drive its media engagement. And for the first month, we were really trying to raise as much small dollar donation, that is $15, $20 donations or less, from Trump supporters. So we need to identify these people and then to engage them in the most compelling way. Thereafter, we handed this capability to the RNC, and we focused on preference models, candidate preference models. Which candidates appeal to which voters? Turnout models, understanding whom was going to vote and who wasn't. And of course, understanding the impact of unregistered vote. That was going to be very important. Finally, we started to look at issue models, predicting which issues, social and political, appeal to which members of the target audience, which voters. We actually assigned different issues to every adult in the entire United States. We could then take these models and put them into a matrix, a little bit like the dental health example, where we can categorize people or segment them according to how they're likely to behave. Core Trump supporters, top right, may be more susceptible to a donation solicitation. Get out the vote, people who are going to vote Republican, but they need persuading to do so. Persuasion audiences, people who need shifting a little bit from the center towards the right. Once we've identified a segment, we can then sub-segment them by the issues that are most relevant to them and then start to target them with specific messages. So, how did this manifest itself? Well, in terms of digital execution, as I mentioned, we raised nearly $27 million just in the first month of the campaign and registered some 1 million email addresses from supporters. Event promotion, we promoted nearly 100 rallies and drove at least 35,000 people to download the Trump app. In terms of persuasion, we delivered a staggering 1.4 billion impressions in just 4 months across 4,000 separate ad campaigns. This increased, or had a net increase of about 3% on favorability towards Trump. And finally, in terms of absentee ballot and get out the vote, we delivered about 80 million impressions, increasing absentee ballot submissions by about 2%. During this period, Google undertook an independent brand lift study to understand the impact of our work. We contacted about 150,000 people and sent them highly targeted digital video content. And this was as opposed to a control group who just received generic messaging. Google reported that the people who received targeted communications responded 18% in terms of the uplift through search volume. This manifested itself in an 11% increase in favorability and an 8% in voter intent for Trump. Finally, we used these data to optimize very targeted, geographically based media buys, going after very small pockets of Trump supporters. This attracted a huge amount of attention because it was in contrast to Hillary's approach, which was much more broad brush and obviously less economical. Clearly, the outcome of the election is well known, and a lot has been written about it. But if there's one singular takeaway from this event, that is that data science, technology, is not a panacea. You cannot make a bad candidate into a good one. You cannot swing an election. But in political campaigns and commercial and brand campaigns, these sorts of technologies can make a huge difference and will continue to do so for many years to come. Thank you.
Are you saying that without your help, I mean, it didn't matter in the end if you helped him or not? I mean, would Donald Trump become president even without your help?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't stand on stage and say that, but I think the point here is that that elections, we're a long way away from a situation where elections can be won or lost simply on the basis of targeted engagement. I think that in elections that are increasingly won by very small margins, technology can play a role, and I think we saw that manifest itself in this last election.
And guys from your company were already here yesterday and the day before, and I already know that, but I want to ask for the audience. You are open to work for any party. It's not just the Republicans. You're open to work for whoever asks you. Is that correct?
Well, I think most people are unaware that we probably work on 8 or 10 national campaigns for Prime Minister and President each year, all over the world. And as many of these are left of centre as they are right of centre, we try and leave our ideological, personal ideologies at the door in order to provide the most professional service. So within a framework, we will consider working for most mainstream parties.
And maybe can you say a few words before I open up to the bar on the article that everybody in Germany read? It was the most read article on Facebook. Wir haben einmal nur kurz die Bombe gezeigt. Wir haben nur kurz die Bombe gezeigt. Was the name of the article by Swiss Magazine. I'm sure you felt the consequence of this article. How did it come about? Is it correct? What's your thinking about this article today?
Well, look, I think some of the facts in the article were correct. I think the journalists tried to connect the dots certainly without all the information at their fingertips. I read a translation of it. We were still heavily involved in wrapping up in work in the States. So whilst I think it had more of an impact in Europe, we were less affected in America.
So it's not, is it correct, incorrect, what we could read there? I mean, how do you...
No, it had some enormous falsehoods in it, but then, as I just explained to you, some of the technologies that we were using were attributed correctly.
We have elections in Germany in September. Do you already work with German parties?
We're not currently working with any parties in Germany.
Why not? So if Angela Merkel is calling you, you can make her great again?
Look, if Angela Merkel was to call me, I'd be privileged. The timelines were complex. We'd just come out of 2 years of work in the United States. This is extremely high pressure, long hours, and after the US election, we all took a break for a while, and obviously the German elections are upon us. So the amount of help that we could contribute at this stage would be limited by that timeline.
So I understand that as soon as you have an ocean profile of a customer or a potential customer and maybe connected with a cookie, you can target them. But how do you actually get to the ocean profile? I guess there are is it kind of a survey a person has to do, and why should people kind of give you those complex information in order to you make an ocean profile? Because I understand that this is kind of the basis of this granular targeting, right?
Certainly. So there's no reason why people should give up any data at all, and there's certainly no obligation to. We've managed to collect millions, or hundreds of thousands, or millions, I should say, of ocean profiles in the United States by people volunteering this information to us. We can then match these ocean profiles against the data attributes that we hold on those individuals who've taken these personality inventories, and we can use that to build a training set to make predictions about the wider audience. Now, in other countries, we don't have this vast insight. We would have to collect it, and whether people wish to give up this information, of course, is entirely up to them.
But how do you get the information? Is it kind of a game, or I mean, what is my incentive to give you to kind of spend 5 minutes or so of my time to give you those informations? Because I guess there are several questions behind such model, right?
Well, I think people undertake different social media surveys for different reasons. I think some people are fundamentally interested to understand what their personality is and what that means. So self-inquiry is obviously driving that. I can't speak for other audiences, but we've had somewhere shy of a couple of million people take this test. So there's obviously a powerful motivation, or many powerful motivations for people to do so.
So it's like a Facebook game. It's like a Facebook game where you answer questions and you find out things about yourself. And while the person is playing that game, he's giving you the data.
Well, they're voluntarily giving up their data. They're doing this in full knowledge of what's happening here. This is not anything Machiavellian or untoward.
No, I'm not saying that. But I'm just trying to understand that through a Facebook game or through a Facebook survey, you are finding that out. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Before you go, it goes back to you. I wanted to just know. In Germany, we have very strict data rules, data protection, different legal system, obviously, than in the US. Would it, from a legal perspective, what you were able to do in the US, would that be possible in Germany, just on a legal?
Well, at a very high level, the culture in the United States is very much opt-out, whereas in Europe it tends to be more opt-in in terms of data. So clearly, you can't just go out and acquire data in the same way that you can in the United States, but you can collect first-party research, such as the ocean research, and if people wish to volunteer their information such that it can be incorporated into marketing and communications, then you can begin to build these sorts of models. Equally, there are a number of companies out there who already have amassed very large quantities of their own data, which can then be used and modeled for their own internal marketing purposes.
I just actually have only one question. So, if it's really true that you helped Trump get into office, are you happy putting a misogynist, buffoon, the most powerful job in the world, who's now fucking up our world? Are you happy?
Well, I think you need to step backwards a little bit and understand that I don't think it's for people sitting in other countries to cast their opinions on the self-determination of the United States. Trump was one of 17 presidential nominees, the largest field ever. And he won that nomination fair and square through free and fair elections, and then went on to win the election. So if that's the will of the people, I don't think it's anyone's job in this room to go against that.
So are you happy? My question.
I'm happy with the job that we did.
Fair enough.
I accept that. You said you work for consumer products and you work for political parties. For you as a service company, does it do any difference if you go like for a toothpaste or for Trump?
Well, obviously, working on a political campaign by its very nature is divisive, and we have to be very careful that the candidates or parties that we work for don't cause any reputational damage to the company, that aren't going to upset our staff or our employees, and that obviously aren't going to upset any of our other clients or customers. But beyond that, as long as they're free and fair elections and democracy is being upheld, we think it's the duty of our firm to provide candidates with the best possible service and fair representation. That's the only way you can have fair elections.
Are there any clients you would refuse to work for?
I'm sure there are, but we try not to go and get ourselves into a position where we have to say no.
So there was no situation where you say no right now?
Not that I can recall, no.
But clearly, someone who likes to grab women by the pussy is absolutely all right.
Well, I can't comment on that. I think that was covered in the news at the time, and I think I've heard both sides of the argument.
Any further questions from the bar? That's it. Alex, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you very much for showing up here, for telling us what you did. I think it's really important to understand what's going on. I mean, obviously, you can argue left and right and wrong, but in the end, what matters is to see what's happening and what you might be able of doing, what you explained to us today. And we are here to provide a platform for content, for description, for learning, for information. And I think you contributed to that platform quite a bit with what you said and how you explained that to us. And I think that's very helpful for me and hopefully as well for our audience. So thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks, Philip.